Hi and welcome to lesson 3 in our series of 4 videos looking at writing formal letters. My name's Peter Travis from Flojo, and in this lesson we're going to focus on using formal language. This is the third of 4 lessons on the subject of formal letters. In lesson 1 and 2 we looked at identifying key information and organising that information clearly. In this lesson, we'll focus on your use of language, and in particular, your ability to create a formal register. This will help you to do well in 2 of the assessment criteria. Language, of course, in terms of using a range of formal vocabulary and grammatical structures, and communicative achievement, by being able to create an appropriate formal tone that has a positive effect on the reader. Let's try and identify some of the features of formal English that we often find in formal letters. Here you'll see an informal letter on the right of the screen, and on the left extracts taken from a formal letter of complaint on the same subject. Read through the letter and the extracts and find any language items that are formal and informal equivalents. For example, I was rather disappointed is a formal way of saying I was furious. Pause the video now and see how many more formal and informal equivalent items you can find. Okay, the next example is here where the passive has been used instead of an active form. This is a common feature of formal writing. And next? Well, this whole sentence is an example of how we might structure a sentence formally. Notice 2 clauses in the informal letter are joined by but, whereas in the formal letter the 2 clauses have been reversed and but is replaced with although, which starts the sentence. This is a more formal way of saying the same thing. Now within this sentence there are further examples of vocabulary that's more formal than the equivalent in the informal letter. For example, alternative accommodation is a more formal way of saying another room. And again, in this context, was situated on is a more formal way of saying was right up on. There are some words we shorten when we're speaking or writing informally, such as telly and phone. In a formal setting, we'd use the full form of the words. Notice also how the writer has used the formal structure neither and nor in the text on the left. We avoid idiomatic language in formal writing, so the long and the short of it on the right is replaced with in short on the left. A common feature of formal writing of this kind is inversion, where the subject and the verb are reversed. So we have should I receive on the left. This, along with the change in vocabulary, makes the highlighted clause far more formal than if I don't get my money back on the right. Finally, here we can see that contractions are avoided in formal writing, so it's I will rather than I'll. And again, the change in vocabulary expresses the same point far more formally. So here's a summary of some of the formal language we've used in this letter. We tend to understate our feelings and would say I was rather disappointed or I was somewhat surprised, instead of saying how we really felt. And for the same reason, we don't use exclamation marks either. We often use the passive to emphasise the action when the person is of less importance, and of course we avoid contractions in formal letters. We tend to use formal equivalents of idiomatic language and avoid missing words out like we sometimes do in informal writing. And finally, particular sentence structures can be used to create a formal tone. Inversion is one example of this, as was the use of although earlier in the video. Being able to call on formal structures like the ones we've looked at, as well as using a wide range of vocabulary and grammatical structures generally, will help you score well in terms of language. And being able to create a formal tone will go some way towards gaining a good mark in communicative achievement. Finally, here's a simple quiz to bring this lesson to an end. How would you express these statements formally? Here you go. Hopefully you got most of these correct. That's the end of this lesson. When you have time, watch our fourth video, which looks at proofreading. If you think you'd benefit from having model answers to CAE style writing tasks, find out more about Flojo's CAE Exam Success Plus, which contains lots of typical exam questions, tips on how to answer each one, and an interactive sample answer with further tips and advice. And if you're studying for CAE on your own and need feedback on your writing skills, find out more about our CAE Writing, Critique and Correction service at the address below.